Welcome to This Explainer. If you've ever felt like your agile transformations just keep hitting a brick wall or sliding right back into old habits, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're breaking down a concept called Toyota Kata and exactly how it fundamentally shifts organizations from a reactive firefighting mode into a proactive scientific coaching culture. Let's get into it.
So, here is our game plan for today. We're going to start by escaping the daily whirlwind, explore the Kata paradigm, walk through the 4 steps to improvement, check out the real power of coaching, see why experiments completely beat action items, and finally, look at how to build a true problem-solving culture.
All right, let's kick things off with escaping the daily whirlwind and really surviving the chaos.
We have all been there, right? This quote just perfectly captures why teams struggle so much to innovate. They are constantly consumed by immediate reactive demands. I mean, the daily whirlwind of deadlines, user stories, and defects can easily eat up 100% of your capacity. When you're just trying to keep your head above water and survive the day, finding the mental bandwidth to actually improve the system, it feels practically impossible.
And that leads us to a massive difference in mindset: reactive problem-solving versus directed improvement. Reactive problem-solving is basically what we do when we put out today's fires, fixing a bug or patching a server just to keep the lights on. Directed improvement, on the other hand, is totally different. That's asking, how does this process absolutely need to operate in the future, and systematically closing the gap between where we are right now and where we need to be.
Which brings us nicely to the Toyota Kata paradigm itself, the scientific mindset.
Look, the crucial thing to understand is that Kata isn't just another agile framework to bolt onto your process or, another pointless meeting for your calendar. It is a fundamental shift in how we develop people's thinking. Think of it as an invisible routine made visible. It's a structured routine for scientific thinking, systematic problem solving, and, most importantly, coaching people to actually develop those skills. You are basically building a community of scientists right in your workplace.
A great way to picture this is like learning a sport. Think about a ski coach. They don't just sit there watching a student and yell, "Ski better." You'd fail, right? Instead, a Kata coach guides a learner slightly beyond what they already know, what we call their threshold of knowledge. They might say, "Hey, keep your chest facing downhill while you turn your skis." That gives a student one specific, testable experiment to run so they can actually improve their skill.
So, how do we actually execute this? Let's look at the 4 steps to improvement, the engine behind all of this.
There are 4 major phases here, and they absolutely must happen in this exact order. First, understand the overarching challenge. Second, deeply grasp your current condition. Third, establish your next target condition. And finally, step 4, experiment against the obstacles in your way. Notice anything there? You don't even touch an experiment until step 4. You literally have to understand the problem before you jump in and try to solve it.
And here is where the magic really happens. Notice how this iterative cycle continuously loops back around? It's not a one-and-done checklist. Once you reach a target condition, or maybe your time runs out, you don't just stop. You loop right back around. You reevaluate your current condition, because hey, your experiments probably changed the environment. Then you set a new target condition, and boom, you start experimenting all over again. It is a continuous, nested iteration.
Now let's talk about the human element, the power of coaching, and really developing your people.
There's an incredible story from our sources that I just have to share. Instead of using a rigid check-the-box compliance list, a manager used daily coaching to help a struggling employee on a performance improvement plan. And guess what? It saved their job. This wasn't one of those disingenuous corporate pips where you give someone an impossible list and wait to fire them. No, the manager used the coaching kata, asking the employee every single day, "What do you intend to do? What do you expect to happen? And what did you actually learn?" After 90 days, the employee entirely transformed, kept their job, and became a massive contributor. Why did that actually work? Because the coach creates a safe space. They give the team member a real opportunity to turn a mandatory task into a self-driven, intrinsic goal. I mean, think about the huge difference between being told, "You need to do this," which just breeds compliance, versus saying out loud, "I want to do this," which sparks real intrinsic motivation. The coach's job isn't to spoon-feed the solution. It's to guide the learner's thinking so they figure it out themselves.
Okay, moving on to experiments over action items, testing hypotheses in the real world. In Western business culture, we are completely obsessed with to-do lists, aren't we? We love writing down action items. But Kata shifts us away from jumping to conclusions and forces us into rigorous hypothesis testing. Look at the traditional Kaizen newspaper. It's basically just a lean to-do list of solutions. But the experiment record, which is the true heart of Kata, forces you to state your hypothesis. It changes the entire conversation from "what are you going to do" to "what do you expect to learn?"
And by explicitly separating the intended action from the expected result, you force the learner to distinguish between cause and effect. You write down the exact step you're taking, then you write down exactly what you expect to happen. And here's the kicker: you don't fill in the actual result until after you run the test. If your expected result doesn't match what physically happened, congratulations, you just found a gap in your knowledge. That is exactly where the real learning happens. Just remember, you don't always need to be testing a perfect solution. Sometimes your expected result is literally just to gather baseline data on a process. Sure, you might run a straight-up hypothesis test, but your experiment could also just be observing the assembly line for 20 minutes to gather information. Or, trying a new process purely to see what obstacles pop up in your way. The ultimate goal here is learning, not just completing tasks.
Finally, let's zoom out a bit. Building a problem-solving culture and systemic comprehension across the whole org. We see this trap all the time. If the continuous improvement team acts as a middleman, the vital vertical connections in the organization are totally weakened. The actual line leaders must lead the changes. You can't just have your agile or lean coaches mapping all the processes, tracking the metrics, and running the experiments. No way. The line managers, the real stakeholders, have to own the system. The continuous improvement team is only there to teach them how to coach, not to do the heavy lifting for them.
A true continuous improvement culture relies on daily, structured conversations, not just some quarterly off-site seminar. It requires leaders who actually own the operating system. It means managers actively engaging in daily coaching conversations, using Socratic teaching, asking questions rather than just barking orders. And above all, it demands a relentless focus on keeping learners right at the very edge of their threshold of knowledge.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you today. Are you challenging your learner? If your coaching sessions are starting to sound like boring, routine report outs, you really need to ask yourself, how will I push my team beyond their current threshold of knowledge today? Because growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone, and it definitely doesn't happen by accident. It happens through deliberate, scientific practice. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Now get out there and start experimenting.